But today what we're going to look at is kind of your programming due to what type of weeds you have, whether it be in a cool season or warm season turf species. Our warm season is going to focus on predominantly pre-emergent herbicide options. This is more in the southern states, obviously, where you're going to have growing conditions year-round and you're going to have weed problems year-round. Some of those concepts do have to shift when you get into the more northern transition zone. We grow a lot of warm season grass in Kansas as well, but it's more of an annual type of perennial plant, as we call it. So we can't use as many pre-emerged herbicides. But the big take-home thing today is looking at making sure you get a good herbicide program and you're planning for rotating modes of actions and you know the options that are out there. And we will talk a little bit about budgeting and how your herbicide options, depending on what you pick and choose, will depend on the kind of the bottom line dollar as well. So as we all know, weeds and options differ upon the grass type that you have, whether it be cool season or warm season. For example, in warm season grasses, you see torpedo grass and Bermuda grass. In cool season grasses, we see quackgrass and ryegrass or Kentucky bluegrass or even tall fescue. So it depends on which type of species you're growing, depends on what type of what weeds you end up seeing and what herbicide options that are out there and available. Your cultural practices are the basis first. I am the first person that when I spray a herbicide and it doesn't kill the weed, I blame the herbicide. When in reality, I didn't do my due diligence and grow healthy turf, number one. So make sure you are doing your right fertility management. You're doing your right watering regimes, irrigation. You can see here with all the crop circles in this field, it's kind of hard to see on the screen here, but this can different weed issues. In the dry areas, we have different weed problems compared to the areas that are getting more water. So make sure you're doing the right cultural things. For example, your mowing quality. It matters. We talk about mowing height, why your mowing height is important, whether it be cool season or warm season. But when you have poor cut quality with your mowers, you're now injured the turf. And when the turf is injured, it's just like us getting injured. It takes more time. It takes more energy to now repair ourselves and repair the turf. Now, during that time, we're shifting now the competitive advantage to the weeds. The turf is not able to thrive, but the weeds are able to thrive. So make sure that you do have good mowing quality throughout. Another important factor to consider throughout the rest of this presentation is resistance. We've talked about resistance. There's a lot of resistant weeds out there that have been documented. And if you can prevent it, then it's going to save you bottom line money in the long run. Because once you use a mode of action that is now no longer effective, say for annual bluegrass control, any of those herbicides that have that same mode of action are now not effective as well. So you may have to shift your mode of action, and now you may not be able to purchase the cheapest herbicide out there, but you have to purchase a herbicide that will work at that time. So keep that. Sometimes it's always better just to start fresh. You know, get rid of out with the old and in with the new. Once you get certain, when the turf gets declined so much, or when you have a weed population where it's time to just go non-selective, take everything out and start all over. But there are some complications, especially when it comes to warm season grasses and weed control. Warm season grows year-round, and so the weeds grow year-round. So you definitely want to look into definitely figuring out a way to prevent those weeds instead of being on a recovery type or a reactive type of program where you're using only post options. Integrate the two pre's and the posts together. Growth and recovery often do not coincide with each other, as well as overseeding. Once we start overseeding warm season grasses, we can't use certain pre's, or we have to stop earlier so then you can be able to seed into them and then come back later on. And now we're growing both a warm season and cool season, which are limiting our options when it comes to herbicides. Because a lot of herbicides are warm season only or cool season only. And then there's select ones that are both warm and cool season tolerant species. So other things to really consider when you're looking at your pre-emergent herbicide options for warm season grasses are when is your season? When is the time? Is it year-round? Is it seasonal, summer, spring, fall? This is going to be able to determine what pre-emergent herbicides you're using, so then you can maximize recovery of that turf area. What are your historic weed problems? For example, If you've got high goosegrass pressure in some of your areas, you want to make sure you're going after and using those pre-emerge herbicides that have high efficacy on goosegrass. You're not just using a pre-emerge just to use a pre-emerge, but you're using the ones that have the increased efficacy. You know, do you want to overseed? I see less and less actual overseeding happening and more liquid overseeding and using the colorants. This opens a big door when it comes to being able to use pre-emerge herbicides year-round instead of interseeding ryegrass into it. So pre-emerge herbicides, you know, prevent the emergence of weeds. It does not prevent or kill the weed seeds. So you can see here on the non-treated on the right, you can see that the weed seeds are emerging or germinating, where here on the left in a treated auger with pre-emerge herbicide, it is not preventing the germination, but is preventing the emergence. For pre-emerge herbicides to work, it's got to be taken up by that plant. So the seed has both a root and a shoot, so then it takes up the herbicide in the root or the shoot and then kills that tiny, tiny plant. It doesn't kill a seed, it kills a small growing plant. So actually, for pre-emerge herbicide to work, you actually have to have the weeds to germinate themselves. So very effective against annual weeds, predominantly grassy weeds like crabgrass, goosegrass, annual bluegrass, because you're able to deplete that seed bank that's in that soil profile. But just like that pre-emerge herbicide inhibits the root on that seed, it does have the possibility of inhibiting the roots of your warm season stolons or rhizomes. You can get, if you have a lot of pre-emerge herbicides out there on some injured turf areas, you can get what's called clubbing of the roots, because that herbicide is still on that soil surface. The rhizome then roots down into it, but not able to break through that barrier. It hits that barrier and then just sits there and kind of clubs. And that produces a safety hazard. You can see here kind of what I call the looping of the stolon right here. It's now above the soil surface and can cause an injury of players or to trip on it as well. There's tons and tons of different pre-emerge herbicides out there. They different rates. There's different active ingredients, as well as your different modes of actions. You can see your mode of action here on the left side, the mode of action numbers. So being able to rotate these modes of actions really helps with resistance management, as well as making sure that you know what your reseeding interval is with these herbicides. Some have longer reseeding intervals and some have shorter. For example, you have products like Spectacle or Indaziflam that has a 12-month reseeding interval. So you're not going to be able to go out and reseed or overseed rye into it. Or you have some other ones that are fairly short-lived, for example, like Pendam Aquacap or Pendimethalin, which is about three months. But to get achieve good weed control, we target mainly 3 weed species when it comes to warm season grasses: goosegrass, crabgrass, and annual bluegrass. And they all germinate at different times of the year. We time most of our pre-emerge herbicides according to that crabgrass germination, as you can see here by the red line, is when you get soil temperatures roughly at about a 2 to 4 inch soil depth at about 55, 57 degrees consistently over a 5-day average. Goosegrass is a little bit later germinating, which makes it a little bit more difficult weed to control, because by this time, some of our pre-emerge herbicides are wearing off, and we don't have enough in the soil level for it to prevent germination. And then if you were to do going after your winter annual weeds like annual bluegrass, you would want to target your application to prevent that spike or that germination growth in the end of the summer, more towards the fall time frame. So there's also other ones in there. You got burrweed, doveweed, little barley. It's one of those crazy ones that germinates late in the fall, but we don't see it until the springtime. It's commonly confused with foxtail grasses as well. So there's a lot of different ones out there, and our most common applications for pre-emerge control are this. You have a spring application, you apply it on there, you apply it to the soil surface, and then over time, your efficacy decreases. And then you would do the same thing in the fall for annual bluegrass. Every herbicide has what's called a half-life. And it doesn't matter if you put a dump truck load on it or a teaspoon. At that half-life, or that certain period of time, half of it's gone. So as you can see here, over time, that herbicide depletes. So there's other options that you can do with split applications. You could go out and you could put an early pre, a late pre for your annual grasses like crabgrass and goosegrass, or you can come back with and in your fall you can do 2 as well to make sure that you get that spike to prevent that germination. Most commonly, our treatments are going to be a barricade or a pendulum or a dimension, and as soon as it starts greening up, we're going to go out and we're going to put our application on, and then over time, the herbicide amount that's in the soil is going to deplete, and then you might get some breakthrough of something like goosegrass. But if you know these herbicides and kind of know a little bit more about them, other than it's just a pre-emerge herbicide, you can fine-tune your timing and maximize your herbicide efficacy just by maybe delaying it a little bit later or putting it on a little bit earlier. So for example, spectacle flow, we talked about that one a little bit earlier, and dazaflam is the active ingredient in it. It is a very long-term pre-emerge herbicide. Remember, the reseeding interval is 12 months, so it lasts a pretty good while. So you can go out super earlier with it, mix it with like Trimec Classic, clean up your broadleaf weeds as well, and then you're going to have that herbicide able to get your annual grasses and then last a little bit longer, more into this area right here to even get some of your winter annuals as well. But then you have combination products, prodiamine, which is a pre-emerge for crab and goose, and azoxaben or gallery is another common treatment that would go in with it. Azoxaben or gallery is really good on those broadleaf annual weeds, looking like your spurge, knotweed, which I know is a very problematic weed in a lot of sports turf because it can grow in compacted soils, it can grow in flooded areas if the turf is under a lot of water for an extended period of time, get a lot of knotweed. So if you can mix these products together, you got multiple modes of actions along with being able to target the weed species that's out there. But if you don't have a lot of broadleaf weeds, it may not be important to put azoxaben or gallery is the trade name that's in there. If you use a product called Dimension, this is a very common product that's on the market now. Very effective pre-emerge weed control, but it has a different niche as well as it has an early post application. So if you waited a little bit later for that crabgrass to start germinating, Dimension, even though it's a pre-emerge herbicide, will kill a 1 to 2 leaf crabgrass stage. So you see it that it's starting to germinate, and then now you've applied it, it can kill that first flush of 1 to 2 leaf crabgrass, and now you have a barrier in the soil to get the herbicide throughout the season as well. Echelon is another one. Echelon is actually a mix of prodiamine and sulfentrazone. This is most commonly misused because it's put out too early. They just say, all right, well, I'm gonna put it out, in the spring with my regular pre-emerge herbicides. But at this time, you're going to be too late for pre-crabgrass, but too early for any post or goosegrass. And sulfentrazone. Sulfentrazone is a post-activity for nut sedge. It's also a post-active on goosegrass, and they're later germinating, so you want to put the product out a little bit later. If not, if you put it out here, you're just wasting your money because every time there's an active ingredient in the bottle, the price goes up. Every time there's a more percentage in the bottle, the price goes up. So misapplying it, and if you applied it early, you just put a lot of sulfentrazone out there that's not going to do any good because your nut sedge or your goosegrass is not germinating at that time. Ronstar Flow is a different pre-emerge herbicide in that Ronstar does not inhibit rooting. Ronstar is a great pre-emerge herbicide that you can go out and apply at sprigging. You can put it under sod because it will not inhibit rooting. Ronstar Flow, though, you cannot apply to actively growing grass. You must apply it when it's dormant. So you need to put it out here for pre-crabgrass earlier because if you wait a little bit too late, whenever it's starting to green up, you're going to get some turfgrass injury. And I'll show a picture of that here in a little bit. But Ronstar G is a granular formulation of Ronstar. It can be applied as really good goose control, more consistent than a lot of the other herbicides. It can be applied during the summer when the turf is actively growing. Here's a perfect example of it. Up on the top here, you can see this is from Dr. McCurdy. He applied Ronstar Flow, the liquid formulation, on October 15th. That was 2 weeks after. It's kind of hard to see, sorry, with the lights here. It did get very good effective weed control when you came back in January, but you did have some herbicide injury. Here's some other common pre-emerge that have been applied on October 15th. You can see atrazine failed and had some breakthrough when it came to your pre-emerge. Dimension did fairly well. Barricade did fairly well, but Ronstar did really well also as the other herbicides. Now, all pre-emerge herbicides are not created equally either when it comes to your weed control. You got Barricade. I don't know what happened here, why it says cell range, but the length of the bar increases. As it increases, it means the higher the weed control. You can see Barricade did really well for annual bluegrass control when you're looking at a fall application. This is January rated, where you can see Atrex or atrazine, Pennant Magnum did not do as well. Same thing with Henbit. Henbit is a broadleaf annual winter weed. So as you can see where it did the atrazine, Atrex did not work so well on the annual bluegrass, it did fairly well on the Henbit control. So this is just to say you need to determine as well which weeds you're going after. It's not always a blanket application to cover all the different weed species that are out there. But what about overseeding? When it starts to overseeding and your reseeding intervals, like we said before, most pre-herbicides are going to talk about the reseeding interval in months. Post-applications, though, are looking at weeks to days. And as a cool season turf grass manager, I see in Kansas, we do a lot of overseeding constantly throughout the year, so we're constantly provided and looking at using post-activities, where pre-activities or pre-herbicides are more commonly used in the warm season type grasses. So a good plan, if you were to go out and you want to look at maybe pre-programs and products, if you were going to do a September 15th overseeding date, we just use this as an arbitrary date so you can look at when you would need to time out your pre-herbicides prior to or after, so you don't injure any of your ryegrass, or you make sure that you get that money to the ground, as I like to say, because if you're paying for the seed, you want it to grow. The last thing you want to do is apply it out there and not get the germination just because there's some residual pre-emerge herbicide out there. So you can see you got Barricade. Best if you get it 3 months prior. Absolutely, last app can go out any more than 60 days before. Same thing with Dimension. It has 42. Ronstar D is 60. Then you can come back here after you have an established ryegrass stand and put a pre out. And this is to prevent your annual bluegrass because there are minimal post options when it comes to annual bluegrass control in ryegrass and a Bermuda grass mixed field. So you can see you can do Barricade, you can reapply 4 to 8 weeks after your seeding, Dimension 128 days. But if you really want to fine tune your herbicide program, you mix in your post activity as well, because you will have some escapes because these rates will not be at an adequate level. And you can see Revolver post, you can do 7 days prior to overseeding. So you can go in and you can clean up these areas with Transit, Revolver, Monument, but you got to pre-plan these. This is not I'm going to seed. Well, I need to go clean those weeds up instead of being reactive of now I can't seed for 21 days. No, look to plan your seeding dates and then plan your herbicide applications prior to make sure that you get good effective control. So these all can be mixed together to have a good program when it comes to pre and post options for annual grassy weeds in the spring, annual grassy weeds in the fall, as well as cleaning up maybe some of your POA annual that may have escaped, or any of your other grassy weeds, goosegrass, during the summertime. Because as we all know, as our field gets torn and wore, it just creates a void now in that soil surface, a break in a herbicide barrier, and then that way, and then when that occurs, then you end up getting breakthroughs and you'll need a post application to help clean it up. So there's a lot out there that can be controlled post, as well as with the pre's. Here's some perfect examples of it with purple nut sedge, yellow nut sedge. You got Kalinga here on the left, as well as crabgrass. This is Virginia buttonweed. That is a very southern weed. It is a tough one to get rid of. It's kind of a woody stem. It really can make a fine, thick mat very quickly. A lot like prostate knotweed that we see more in the northern transitional zones. So weed control fundamentals when it comes to your second, third applications, make sure you get some post in there for your weeds that may escape. Like I said, for your crabgrass or your goosegrass, you can use diethypyr, dimension, post activity, quinclorac or drive, XLR8. It works really well, and that one can be applied in a wide range during the year. If you ended up having something that you need to clean up in the fall, you can use drive shortly after seeding and shortly prior to seeding as well. And there's some other ones up here: Revolver, Dismiss, Monument, Sedge Hammer. I'll talk a little bit more about Dismiss and some of the new products that are coming out as well that will really have some good effective weed control on yellow nutsedge and long-term weed control. Now when it comes to broadleaf weeds, there's a lot of combination products out there that contain multiple active ingredients. This is really key to know what kind of weed you're going after, because not one broadleaf synthetic auxin herbicide does control to all of them evenly, or equally, I say. 2,4-D, for example, wild garlic, it's fair, but it's poor on carpetweed, buttonweed, and spurge. So you would want to have something like Trimax Southern that has multiple active ingredients, or Speed Zone Surge has multiple active ingredients. So it gives you a broad spectrum of weed control as well in one bottle. So there's a lot of broadleaf weed controls that can be mixed in when it comes to your warm season stuff. Those programs, though, they're not going to be, that I'm going to talk about, are not going to be comprehensive. These ideas, and this is where the budget information comes in, and this is where it's important to know to rotate your modes of action. When you look at a herbicide label, there's a code on the front. It says a group 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It is important to rotate those because it can have a very huge dent in your budget if you were to use up a mode of action on a weed, and then you're not able to use anything in that rest of that class. So, for example, if you're doing a fall non-overseeded, you can predominantly rely on your pre-emerge herbicides. For your annual bluegrass, you got different options, A, B, C, and D. We're looking at timings of when you would put it out. You know, you're looking at September or fall, and then you're looking at, you know, another application of either Monument, Revolver, Simazine, Roundup to clean up some of the escapes. And you see that there's a varying price with these, anywhere from $140 to $210. But that would be a non-overseeded scenario. But you also have a number here that correlates with the mode of action that's on that bottle. So, for example, if you started doing this dimension curve type program for $150 a year, and you go year after year after year, and you start showing resistance to dimension, anything with a 3 is not going to be able to use anymore. So you have to now go to a plant option B or option C, and you're looking at $50 to $60 more an acre. So understanding and rotating those modes of actions is crucial when it comes to making sure you have a good, effective weed control program. Now, this doesn't mean, you know, I have to do the $200 one every year, because you can run into the same problem with that as well. It means that maybe one year when we're looking at budgeting and what we want to do and pre-planning for that year, 2 to 3 years out, you say, all right, we're going to spend a little bit more this year on our pre-program and rotate our modes of actions, and then maybe cut back on something else. Rotate that line in your budget to help rotate those modes of action. There's other options if you're going to assume October 15th overseeding. You got multiple plans here where you would go out with a pre-emerge in July with a barricade or something in August. Ronstar followed up with a fall application of Monument or Revolver. And you can see the same thing with rotation of these modes of actions as well. And this is drastic price differences when you're looking at something, for example, like Barricade and Monument versus Ronstar and Revolver. These are very effective pre and post options for weed control, but they know that, and so it's going to be $320 per acre compared to $165 per acre. You have some more to continue. We can fit all this on the same slide. You can see we have more rotation and anywhere from 175 to 320 as well. So you have a lot of different options, a lot of different programs out there. Some of the new things that have been looked at, and Dr. McCurdy has done some studies, is looking at plant growth regulators to reduce annual bluegrass and overseeded perennial ryegrass. wanted to make sure that there was no adverse effects on the ryegrass, as this is a common application that's used on golf course putting greens to minimize the seed head production. Trim-It is one product that is, even though it's a plant growth regulator, it does have some activity on annual bluegrass, and so it really stunt and reduce those populations. He did this trial in January 2017. I'm not going to talk a whole lot about it just because he's the one that did the research, but I can kind of go over the overviewing information that he found. So this overseeding date was October 3rd for this research trial. And no matter what pre-emerge or what plant growth regulator that was out there, they did not see any adverse effects to the ryegrass except Trim-It, maybe about 20% reduction in perennial ryegrass stand. That would mean you would need to apply 20% more seed to get the same effect if you were to use some of these other ones, which means you would put more money in the bank. So it may be better to look at a different option when it comes herbicide-wise or plant growth regulator-wise. That way you don't get the reduction in the stand. But you did get very good annual bluegrass control with a lot of these, or heat saw with a lot of these herbicides, ranging from Barricade all the way down here to Proxy. And so we're seeing plant growth regulators are doing just as good in the Bermuda grass perennial ryegrass swards instead of using just your common pre-emerge herbicide that was applied after overseeding in August. So that's kind of where we're going with the cool season grasses. The warm season grasses, that was where we're going with the warm season grasses. With the cool season grasses, I talked about this a little bit earlier. You know, first do right by the plant. Make sure you have the right cultivar. Has anybody ever heard of the NTEP, National Turfgrass Evaluation Program? Utilize that data. It's great. You don't have to worry too much that it's in your backyard. You know, find a region or an area that's similar to yours. If you're in Nebraska and you don't have any tall fescue data or perennial ryegrass data in Nebraska, but they got some in Kansas, that's a close enough climate, use it. That's going to start with the best species that's adapted to your area, which means it's going to be a healthier turf, which then in return it means you're going to have better weed control because that plant is a more fit plant for that environment. Proper irrigation, correct mowing height and frequency, fertility, cultivation practices like aerification also influences your weeds population. If you're doing it the wrong time, you could be spreading weeds. You can also be breaking your herbicide barrier, as well as you can be doing it when your turf is not able to recover from that. They are weakening your turf. They're increasing your weed populations in that turf as well. So mowing, make sure you do your mowing correctly. Mowing height, make sure you keep it in the range. I always say there's textbook mowing heights. I mean, someone did a research project and saw 2 7/8 was the best mowing height for grass. Why? Well, can you mow at 2 7/8 all the time on a rotary mower? Can you go, when it comes down to a real mower, you can change it. Stay within the recommended range. And my next question is, well, can I go shorter or taller between seasons? Just stay in the range. I like the idea of if you want to go shorter, go shorter to the bottom of the range. If you want to go higher, go to higher. But don't go outside of that range. And you can get all sorts of different things, increased disease, increased puffiness, thin turf. You'll get weeds taken over if it's too short. So make sure you're right in the mowing height. This is a perfect example. I know this is showing 1 inch. This yellow bar is a 1 inch mowing height, 2 inch mowing height, 3 inch mowing height, and a 4 inch mowing height for crabgrass populations and tall fescue. Don't worry too much. That's a 1 to 4 inch. But the idea here is that if you mow your turf at 1 inch of tall fescue, which is not an optimal mowing height, you have a higher crabgrass population you now have to control. If you mow it at the mowing height, say 3 inches, you have only 30% of that population you have to control. So you're putting less pressure on your herbicides to do the job that they say they're doing. So doing right by the turf first, and then using your weed control methods to come in and clean up. Here's a perfect example of that research trial for fescue, 4 inches. I know it's a very tall mowing height, but it was able to restrict crabgrass populations. The 1 inch, you can see it's just about covered. Now, same thing with fertility. With cool season grasses, I'm going to go through these pretty quick. The take-home message, I'm not going to talk a lot about fertility, is focus on fall when it comes to your nitrogen applications. Fall tends to be better. In the springtime, you get more shoot growth, a flush of growth, and you end up stimulating some weed germination during that time. And minimize, your applications in the summer, not only for weeds, but for other environmental or disease reasons can be applied to it. And then the last thing I want to talk about before we get into the programs for cool season grasses is talk about seeding and cultivation. You could be moving your weed seeds around. You could be hurting your turf by aerifying at the wrong time. This is a common practice, as you all know, used on athletic fields because that field is highly compacted due to the amount of traffic that's going on it. But if you can change that, if you can make it to a safe, playable surface that is not too compact, you shift your competitive advantage from the weed species that can tolerate the compacted areas to a turfgrass species that does not like those areas. For example, annual bluegrass, goosegrass cannot weed. Things to consider real quick, depending on the turf species you have, you got to have the right amount of recovery. You want to aerify at times that the turf is going to be able to recover, not during times that the turf is not going to be able to recover. Not a lot of rocket science, but look at what weeds are present at the same time. If the weeds are there, are you going to be moving them around? Are you going to be moving seeds around? And that's why you would, like with annual bluegrass, you would avoid cultivation during August and September when these are germinating. You're also creating voids for that new annual bluegrass to germinate as well. So avoid the summer cultivation, and when grasses are under stress anytime because it's hard to recover, and it tilts the scale in favor of warm season annuals and perennial weeds. So now one thing when it comes to cool season grasses is we're constantly seeding thin areas. So it restricts your pre-emerge herbicides because you're constantly throwing down seed and gold mouse in areas that are worn very thin, because our cool season grasses do not recover as fast as our warm season grasses. You do have Kentucky bluegrass that does have rhizomes on it and able to fill in certain areas, but if it's super thin, you can't allow those areas. I like the cleat-in method. Heavy use areas, use the people that are playing on the field as a cultivation practice to help establish seed. So then, for example, these areas you put seed down, and it's hard to tell here, but you can see the cleated marks in the soil, and they're able to push that seed to get good seed to soil contact, and which will increase the chances of that weed, or not weed seed, increase the chances of that turf to grow. But because we're doing that, we're not able to put pre-emerge herbicides out. Because the pre-emerge herbicide does not know the difference between your purchased, expensive, desired turfgrass species and the gnarly goosegrass or crabgrass that's out there. It only knows a weed seed. There's some that are out there that work really well, like 2%. It is one of those pre-emerge herbicides. It's a very short window of pre-emerge activity, but you can apply it at seeding some of these cool season grasses, as well as seed or sprig. There's two newer herbicides on the market. One is tenacity or mesotrione. It's an HPPD inhibiting herbicide, and Pilex, which is a great post option for goosegrass as well. And it has this cool 28-day window where you can do seeding at the time or shortly after or shortly before application. So look into those if you are seeding, that these could give you times in the year where you know it's not optimal to be out there seeding, say springtime, but you got a field that's worn completely flat out, and you know this is the time crabgrass is going to come in. Look to this tool, this 2% tool, as a way that you can go into these high traffic areas, apply it and seed at the same time, and reduce your weed invasion during your establishment phases. That doesn't mean you got to go apply every acreage of 2%, because that's kind of expensive because it has a nice little niche that it fits in. But focus those areas on your high traffic areas, whether it be the center of the field, gold mouse, on and off walks from ramps, and etc. So we do have a lot of don'ts when it comes to pre-emerge herbicides. In cool season, like I said, don't use them if you're going to be seeding, except for Sidgeron or 2%. Don't use within 3 months of growing sprigging Bermuda grass, except Ronstar. We mentioned Ronstar before. It does not inhibit rooting. So this is a great pre-emerge for warm season grasses that you can put if you've got winter injury in areas and prevent your annual grasses from coming up in the spring. If you are going to be sodding or sprigging, you can put this down and you'll prevent your crabgrass, your goosegrass from coming up during establishment as well. Don't use a pre-emerge within two months before sodding, as most of them, like I said, are root inhibiting herbicides. So if you do sod on top of that barrier, you're going to get club roots and not a deep rooting system. And if don't use pre-emerge herbicides, if winter kill may be a possibility in your area, I think this year we're probably going to have more winter kill in our neck of the woods just because of the cold temperatures. So that's one thing that you can kind of plan on, but it's really out of our hands. Mother Nature controls the weather more than we do. We can't really control it. So, you know, if it's a possibility, maybe stay away from the pre-emerge herbicides as well. Avoid risk. If you think that you'll need to be seeding, sodding, renovating, overseeding, doing something, stay away from pre's altogether. Post-emerge herbicides with cool season and warm season, don't use post before or after seeding outside of the label directions. Most post-herbicide options are going to say, 3 to 4 mowings or 2 to 3 weeks after germinating or emergence. Make sure you know when the germinating day is compared to when your seeding day is. Those are 2 different dates. A lot of times I get a call that says, man, I applied this and I really smoked my new grass that came up, but I waited what the label said. The label said 2 to 3 weeks after germination. Well, they did it 2 to 3 weeks after seeding, and it was a week after seeding that it actually germinated. So know when it germinates so you know when you can apply these herbicides. And then after planting, the label specifies how soon, like I said before, it will also specify how soon you can plant as well. So there are some herbicides that can work on newly seeded cool season turf. I mentioned tenacity before. It's also named mesotrione. Pylex is another one that's same mode of action as tenacity. Works really well. Drive, we talked about, is quinclorac. I really like this new Accelerate formulation instead of the 75 dry flowable. There are some other generics. They work just as well too, so you can kind of save a little money sometimes with some of these. Quicksilver is carfentrazone, super safe on small seeded stuff, square one that contains carfentrazone. And we also talked about 2%. So there's some out there. Now when it comes to post and cool season grasses, I look at it by weed species. If you don't have the weed, you don't need to apply a herbicide for it. So look at the species that you're targeting out there. Some of these are going to be more expensive than others. And this is not an all-inclusive list either. There are other options on here. These are some of the top performing, I call textbook answers when it comes to herbicide options for various weed species. There are other options out there. These are the top performing type of ones. So if you got annual bluegrass in your post applications, Exonerate works really well in the spring. If you're going to do a springtime application as a cleanup. But then you're going to look for something like Progress in the fall. These are very season specific. You don't want to get them mixed up because your efficacy will then decrease, and then you're going to lose money because you're applying a product and you're not going to get the bang for your buck. Bermuda grass is also a weed in cool season grasses. Fusillade 2, Acclaim Extra, and Pylex with a Turflawn ester throughout the growing season. There is no herbicide control application for Bermuda grass in cool season grass. There are programs that you can severely injure it along with your other cultural practices. It is a program for suppression, not a control application method. These have got to be timed out for your last seeding because you don't want to put Turflawn ester on too early because then you have that same reseeding interval. Pylex, has anybody seen Pylex? Utilize Pylex? It is a bleaching HPPD inhibiting herbicide, works really well on Bermuda grass suppression and tall fescue. You're going to have to do 3 applications with it, and you want to time your last application right before you do your overseeding. Crabgrass, when it comes to post, you got Dimension with our 1 to 2 leaf stage. Remember, that's super early. Acclaim, Tenacity, Drive, Pylex all work really well. Dandelion, 2,4-D works really well on dandelion. We always say fall applications are best when it comes to broadleaf weed control in our cool season grasses. but there's this product out here called Defender active ingredient fluorosalam that is works way superior in the springtime compared to your other synthetic auxin herbicides. And you're looking at a 0.25 pints per acre application rate compared to a 4 pint per acre application rate of something like Trimet. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Goosegrass, same thing as crabgrass, pretty much the same thing as crabgrass, post applications of goosegrass. And you'll notice here I listed Speed Zone. Speed Zone is a broadleaf herbicide, but has activity on goosegrass. It is very unique. We have worked on it. We cannot pin down. They may know now more from the research that we did back in 2013 or 2014 of what's going on, why that synthetic auxin herbicide that targets broadleaf weeds is injuring goosegrass. You probably might not get 100% control, but if you can catch it early, you can get good activity with this. Knotweed, talked about a little bit earlier. You need to contain triclopyr or dicamba with 2,4-D if you're going to post a pot. If you're doing early, if you can get a pre-out on your warm season grasses, this is the one you're looking at is Oxymin or Gallery for your broadleaf application. Spurge, any of the 3 or 4-way mixtures work really well. And currently, right now, rough bluegrass, there's nothing labeled. The spearback sodium is not on the market anymore, not available. So right now, glyphosate followed by reseeding and cool season grasses. This is going to be one of the more problematic weeds I foresee in the future because rough bluegrass looks really well in mix with your Kentucky bluegrass and your fescue, but as soon as it gets hot, it checks out super quick. So this is going to be more problematic. Clover, real quick, fall applications for broadleaf weed control work really well. If you don't want to use one of the synthetic auxins, look at something like quinclorac. It's a grass-active herbicide, but it does have activity on white clover. Works really good. And to just kind of round them all off, wild garlic, even though it's not a broadleaf weed, broadleaf herbicides work really well. Wild violet is a perennial weed. It does kind of grow across the surface. You must have triclopyr in with whatever synthetic auxin to get good control. The last two, I'll talk about yellow nut sedge a little bit more when we're talking about our new herbicides that are out there. But windmill grass is one that we didn't see for a long time. I call it a non-target weed. When we were using MSMA and cleaning up stuff, this was not a problem. We are getting very weed-specific with our active ingredients, targeting certain weeds, which is, I think, is very good and environmentally friendly, but we don't have the broad spectrum anymore that we used to have, and so a lot of these non-target weeds are showing up. Currently, right now, tenacity is the only thing labeled. There is activity of Pilex and Acclaim Extra, and this is going to be one. It's a perennial weed, but it also spreads by seeds. I call it the tumbleweed of turf in the Midwest, because that seed head breaks off and it just rolls and rolls and rolls and drops seeds and drops seeds and drops seeds. So it's a prolific seed producer as well as a perennial plant that has rhizomes, so it can overwinter with that. Now, yellow nut sedge, I'm going to skip over it because we're going to talk about that when we get to the new herbicides. Section there. So we've kind of gone over both warm season, cool season, and a lot of programs. I know it's a lot. There's a lot of herbicides out there. And for once, I'm actually excited to say there are new herbicides. There's new active ingredients that are in the market. Now, and when I say new herbicides, it doesn't mean we can just throw everything I said out the window. These fit into a weed management plan. These hopefully will be priced very comparable to the herbicides that are already out there. And then you can utilize these in your system, in your programming, in your system to help maybe minimize the amount of applications and maximize weed control, which in the end saves money and time and labor. This is kind of an industry product update when it comes to these. I can get real excited about this stuff. I love killing weeds, and I love trying new things because it's so applied. It's like great information to get out. And we're actually going to look at some data too with these new herbicides. And most of these are going to come out in 2018, sometime in 2018. Not many new herbicide talks have been made, I'd say, in the past couple of years. So this is cool to have these new herbicides out there. The new active ingredient, it actually came from a cereal market. It's called hadoflaxacin methyl. by Dow. They have trademarked this one as Aerolex. It is, I can't remember what it is called in the cereal crop, and actually on the way down here, I heard a commercial on the radio. It was pretty neat to hear something in the cereal crops. It works really well on broadleaf weeds. You're going to have, it's super rain fast, so this is a bonus of this. It is low odor. It's going to mix with your other synthetic auxin herbicide. It's going to have a different site of action, even though it's the same mode of action. So you're attacking the plant in two different areas compared to attacking the plant at the one place. So this is going to help with resistance management. So this is another tool to help with this. It's rapidly degraded in the soil, super environmentally friendly. It is low use rates. We're looking at 0.00892 pounds of acid equivalent, which is the same thing as active ingredient. It's just how the acids are abbreviated per acre. So we're having very low environmental loading with this, both cool and warm season species. We, as sports turf managers, is typically a mono stand, whether it be cool season or warm season. But this also helps out other aspects of the turf industry where you may have a mixed sward of both warm season and cool season. This can be utilized now in an overseeded crop. So you have ryegrass and you're able to apply this. Quick activity. I'm talking 4 to 5 days. You're seeing activity on a plant. It's screaming as you walk away. You can visually see it like you do with Ilex. It's a bleacher, or tenacity is a bleacher. This is going to have a reddening effect to it. And so you'll see the reddening start first and then the twisting like your other synthetic auxins. And low volatility. So take this. Here's the activity you can see of, excuse me, of Game On, which contains that Aerolex, and the reddening effect to it, only 5 days after treatment. Now they're going to put Aerolex or halophosphate methyl in another compound, and you'll see the reddening effect on it too. So taking this compound, all right, and use this existing compound that's already super safe, that already has a signal word, warning signal word, and super low use rates, and the niche was the springtime weed control. Right? This one came out, was co-packed with Dimension when it first came out. So you bought Dimension, this came with it. Now you can buy it by itself, but it's super expensive. Just buy the Dimension and get the free stuff with it. That's what I would suggest. That's going to be a cheaper option, and you're going to have both a pre-herbicide as well as this post for springtime applications. This was done down at Purdue by Dr. Aaron Patton, looking at applying this Defender or Fluorosalam in the springtime in March at 0.25 pints per acre, getting 80% control compared to your Trimac Classic at 3 or 4 pints in the spring. That's only getting, 5, and then up here to only 60% at the high rate of 4 pints per acre. So this is a new this active ingredient works really well in the spring. Now you mix it with Aerolex, and now they're calling it Relzar. This is going to be halophosphate methyl and Fluorosalam. So these are the 2 active ingredients, both cool and warm season grasses. Synthetic auxin and ALS. We have 2 modes of action. So now we're helping with rotating modes of action and attacking the plant, like I said, at 2 different things. There's a 6-week reapplication interval when it comes to it. Always with anything, avoid contact with sensitive ornamentals. Down more in the southern states, and when you add dicamba, you're going to actually get increased tolerance to centipede grass. I know it's not commonly used on sports fields, but centipede is always one of those good indicator grasses like St. Augustine. They're super sensitive grasses, so we like to test those because if it's safe on it, it's going to typically be safe on Bermuda and our other warm season grasses as well. It is 1 simple use rate, over 60 different weeds, rain fast in an hour, no temperature restrictions. That is super huge. Trimax, speed zone, 85 degrees, you can't spray it, right? I don't know where you guys live, but I know when it gets hot in Kansas, it's over 85 degrees until it snows. It's hot all the time. It also has good activity at the low end of the range. Like Katana. Katana is an ALS herbicide that's used for removal of ryegrass out of Bermuda grass, as well as Poa annua control. And it's able to work really well at the cooler temperatures. This one works well in the cooler temperatures as well. So you got both ends. And another big thing we've been testing is, although it may not apply directly to you, on a sports field, but around the property that you may be managing. It can be sprayed under the drip line of ornamental trees. We've done extensive testing and dumping this at 2, 4, 10x rates on ornamental trees to know that it's going to be safe if it's applied up underneath the drip line. We don't want to have another Imprellis accident, so therefore they're starting and hitting this off at the very beginning, so you know it's safe out there and when you're able to apply it. So it's a very good product. You can see here, here's the activity of it on common chickweed 4 weeks after, and this is an untreated plot. So you got really, really good activity as well. Super safe on both cool season and warm season grasses. Fescue, not injured. Here is St. Augustine, so no injury on St. Augustine. So it's also been tested on Bermuda. I just don't have a picture of it. So it's going to be very tolerant at those use rates for both warm and cool season grasses. All right, so then they took that same active ingredient and mixed it with a couple other active ingredients, and now we're calling it Game On. It is 2,4-D-choline, fluoxapyr, and haloxyphen methyl, or Aerolex as its trademark. All right, fluoxapyr is a common active ingredient, synthetic oxygen that's been used by Dow for a while, but they have a new 2,4-D, a 2,4-D-choline. This is low volume, low odor. People do not smell it. It's a low volatility, and now you don't have a danger. Your signal word is a warning instead of danger on the label, which is super important. Wide broadleaf weed control. It works really well on your tough to control weeds. Like I said, and you're going to look at the 3 or 4 pints per acre, which is very common to your synthetic oxygen herbicides, and you're going to get good activity in a lot of different areas. Here is a perfect example of that reddening effect with this product. When Aerolex, haloxyphen methyl, 2,4-D-choline, fluoxapyr, and Game On is applied in about 4 days, you're going to see a reddening effect of that plant. Some people love that. Some people hate that. Some people love it because now a green weed and a green grass sometimes are harder to tell the difference than a red weed and a green grass. Visually from the stands, visually from the TV. But it is fast acting, so you can apply it and then get your effective control soon thereafter. Now, what is the biggest interesting aspect about this new product, haloxyphen methyl, is Dow that's a bad word, bad choice of words. There's too many merging going on when it comes to chemical industries right now. Partnered is a good way with PBI Gordon. PBI Gordon also has haloxyphen methyl. They divided and conquered. For active ingredients to hit the market and for you to get it in your hands sooner, EPA needs lots and lots and lots of data. So PBI said, we're going to go over this way, we're going to get a whole bunch of data. Dow said, we're going to go over this way, we're going to get a whole bunch of data. You can call it whatever over here and mix it with this. We're going to call it this over here and mix it with that. So it also has haloxyphen methyl in it, fluoxapyr, but instead of having 2,4-D-choline, it has dicamba. Okay? Only difference between those products, and this one's going to be called Switchblade. It works on both warm and cool season grasses, all the ones that were cultivated, and a lot of different use areas, including sports fields as well. I personally got to test this one, which is the fun part about it, on some of your tough-to-control weeds. This is prostrate knotweed, all right? We applied it at 43 gallons per acre. The blue bar represents the population at the day we applied, okay? The orange bar represents the population of percent cover 44 days after application, so just a little month and a half here. So you can see in some plots we had anywhere from 40 to 70% cover at application. Now a Switchblade or 4 pints that contains the Aerolex, dicamba, and fluoxapyr at 4 pints, which will be the high rate. We went all the way from a 62% down to a 15% cover. This was also applied in June. That prostrate knotweed was on steroids. It was the healthiest knotweed I have ever seen in my life. So to get that reduction with one application is awesome. So you would want to do this twice, but you do not have, with this product, you do not have the 2,4-D 28-day application interval. I don't know what the application interval is, but if you did 2 applications, you're going to get great control. Here it is on buckhorn plantain. Even at the low rate, you got 100% control, 100% control, and very similar to Speed Zone that's out there. So it's working just as well. Price comparison, hopefully, it's going to be about just as well when it comes to these weeds. White clover, same thing, 100% control when you're looking at 4 pints per acre, and you got significant control at a half rate. And that's very similar to what we saw on Speed Zone. Don't worry about this little guy here in the middle. That little guy was another experimental. And obviously, if you looked at some of the other ones, not going to move forward with that one because it didn't work too well. So here's a great example. This is what the prostate knotweed in the top right looked like at application. I mean, just about 100% cover. This is 44 days after. And you got really, really, really good control. So this shows that there's promising applications with this new active ingredient on some of these tough to control weeds. As we use synthetic auxin herbicides over and over and over, this is going to be one that really aids that. FMC also got their hand in the cookie jar and is working with a new product, or developed a new product called Dismiss NXT. It is looking at using sulfentrazone, which is in Dismiss, and carfentrazone, which is in Quicksilver. Put them together, now it's Dismiss NXT. It's going to be a key, crucial component for long-term yellow nut sedge control. All right, yellow nut sedge, you know, is very tough to control weed. It's got rhizomes, it's got tubers, they can stay dormant, you know, for many years. They can germinate from super deep depths in the soil. But what we're seeing is that this has got activity on tubers themselves and can kill the tubers. So if you're able to kill tubers, you're able to achieve long-term weed control. This doesn't mean you need to purchase year after year after year after year, but use it in your rotation of your herbicides to then deplete that bank that's in the soil. So it has, we did some studies with this, but like I said, it's got carfentrazone, which is in Quicksilver, sulfentrazone, which is in Dismiss by itself. Sulfentrazone is also in a bunch of other pre-mixed products. We'll hit a little bit of those later. You're going to have 30 different rates, 5 to 10 ounces, and they're all going to be depending upon the product, or the, not product, but the turf grass that you're applying it to. So selectivity with this is the difference between 1 glug or 2 glugs. 1 glug may kill a weed, 2 glugs doesn't mean it can kill it any faster, but it probably could kill the grass too. So remember that, it's real important when it comes to selectivity within these grasses. I know there's a lot of bars on here. Don't get too real concerned with the bars. I'm going to point a couple things out here. All right, first thing, this is Dismiss NXT, 15 fluid ounces per acre. All right, over the labeled rate. 10 is going to be the maximum. And so we see you get really good weed control. But that's over the labeled rate, Jared. Why does that matter? Because we didn't get very good effective weed control at the labeled rate. Because just like every time you think you got everything under control, you don't. An hour after application, this is what happens. Okay? We had a massive 1-inch downpour in about 30 minutes, but we still got control 1 hour after application with something like this. So if it is applied and able to get on there and absorb into the plant, move through that plant, you're going to get even better weed control. So even though we didn't see that 100% weed control when it comes to yellow nut sedge with the labeled rate, it's because we didn't really time it out really well. So we'll give good weed control when it's. I was the only one that had bad data apparently out of this. So, but it did work. And so knowing that our environmental conditions, what happened, we're now not blaming the herbicide for not working, but we know why the herbicide did what it did. But the real amazing thing with this product is the reduction in tuber, or the increase in tuber mortality. There was some research that was done down in Georgia. This red bar shows a non-treated plot. There was an average of 162 live viable tubers. If you applied Dismiss at 12 fluid ounces, which is sulfentrazone by itself, that number dropped down to 70. If you applied Dismiss NXT, which is sulfentrazone and carfentrazone, you got 16. 16 viable tubers compared to 162. So you're looking at 90% tuber population reduction. So now you're getting rid of the population that's going to germinate later. And making it out and get those tubers killed is going to be benefits of Dismiss NXT and helping out with when it comes to long-term weed control. And it may be pricey. Carfentrazone is pricey. and we're all trying to do stuff on a budget. But if we're able to rotate this into, instead of using, say, sedge hammer over and over and over and over, we do this 1 year, we're able to then effectively get good weed control and rotating modes of actions as well. So I think this is the last herbicide, and then I'm going to wrap up with looking at prepackaged mixtures and prices, what it would be if you just did it yourself or if you bought it kind of yourself. A new one by PBI Gordon is called Powered by Vexus. I actually don't know what the active ingredient, or not the active ingredient, but the name of it's going to be, but the active ingredients are Primisulfan and Pinoxalam. These are both ALS inhibiting herbicides. Both cool and warm seasons, you get broadleafs, grasses, sedges. You get some pre-activity. It doesn't have a name yet, like I said, and it's currently being registered. We did this out in Manhattan, Kansas, and this is Dimension. We had 100% crabgrass control. And then this is the Powered by Vexus at Primisulfan and Pinoxalam at 2 different rates. This is a split application, and this was on a fertilizer. So this is a granular product, and we got excellent weed control with a pre-emerge. This also has broadleaf post-activity. So now this is a tool that goes in your toolbox, springtime application. It fits in those wedges like we talked about earlier, that you're going to get a broadleaf activity cleanup as well as a pre for a while. So this is all with just these 2 active ingredients. Now this is the same product, 1579. This was on a seed mill. We didn't get very good control with it, and I think that's because wind blows in Kansas every day at about 50 miles an hour. And when that product is so light, and if you're trying to disperse it, it moved probably out of the plot area. It never actually got in contact with the ground. So that fertilizer, that granular product worked really well. And when it comes to crabgrass pre-control, super tolerant on anything we tested. Buffalo, zoysia. It's been tested on Bermuda as well, but 100% tolerance. So it's a good tool, another tool in the toolbox. So I'm going to skip over Fahrenheit and Solero. Do have questions, but I want to end on a couple quick little slides. I call it Controlling Weeds Without Blowing Your Budget. This is designed for you to start thinking before saying, yeah, I'll take that. I'll take that. It's designed so you know what's in the products, and you know that you can do it on your own if you want to. You know, maybe you don't want to buy a prepackaged mixture, because every time you add a active ingredient to a product, you're going to increase the price of that product. We talked about sulfentrazone, for example, fast acting. You can mix it with prodiamine, and it gets pre-activity as well. It works really well on grasses, and it works really well on sedges. It's in a lot of different products. One is Dismiss South, the sulfentrazone plus imazethapyr. Dismiss by itself just only has sulfentrazone. Okay, can't apply it above 90 degrees. Bahia, Bermuda, Buffalo, Centipede, Kikuyu, and zoysia grass, so it's warm season grasses only, not cool season grasses. But there's a price associated with it. This is equal amounts of Dismiss and percent purple nut sedge control. All right, so each of these products have the same amount of sulfentrazone in it. You have Dismiss, so sulfentrazone only. Dismiss South, which is the same amount of sulfentrazone plus imazethapyr. Certainty and Monument and Sedgehammer are 3 other products. You can see you got varying control. Just Dismiss by itself, you got 60% control, but imazethapyr added to Dismiss, and you're getting up here to nearly 100% control. So now that you know, just because it says Dismiss or Dismiss South, you know the price associated with that herbicide. Dismiss by itself is $73 an acre, roughly. Remember, these costs and products are going to vary. I'm going to say that as kind of a clause real quick, depending on who your sales rep is, where you get it, and how nice they are to you. You're bundling it together, early order program, or if you're going to get it on the spur of the moment, the price is different. So at the time when I was making this, Dismiss was roughly $73 an acre at 8 fluent ounces, 60% weed control. Dismiss South, if you're in warm season, it's $111 per acre. Okay, so is a 35% increase in control, is it worth $38? That's a decision you got to make. Is it? Yeah. Is it not? I don't know. Super high traffic area or super high infested areas, it may be worth the $38 extra an acre. But on the areas that you don't have as much yellow nut sedge pressure, you could probably go with something here and still achieve effective weed control. And you can see that all these sulfentrazone products work really well. I should have just showed that one up with the earlier one. But they do have similar sedge control, but the prices do vary. Dismiss, sulfentrazone by itself, 73. We talked about Dismiss South, which is with imidazepyr, 110. If you do Dismiss sulfentrazone at 12 fluid ounces per acre, which is at the labeled rate, you're looking at 110. So changing your rate is going to change your price per acre basis as well as your efficacy. And you can see here you got Sedgehammer, Halo Sulfuron, $100 an acre, more of a contact. You definitely have multiple applications with all these products. But with one single application, you can get really good weed control. So a lot of these products, for example, that was sulfentrazone added with imidazepyr. One of the new trends we're seeing is putting as much stuff in the bottle as we can and doing one application and getting on. So great idea, great concept. Really helps if we misidentify weed. It makes our life easier when we can sleep better at night knowing we put a lot of active ingredients out and got a very broad spectrum of weed control. But every time you put one of those in a tank, the price goes up. But every time these have been put in the tank or in the bottle, it's not necessarily at a rate that's going to give you effective weed control. For sulfentrazone, for example, you need at least 0.25 pounds of active ingredient per acre. When you get Dismiss in a product called Q4 and you apply it at the labeled rate, you're below that 0.25 pounds of active ingredient per acre. So we're the first one to say, it didn't work on yellow nut sedge, but it had Dismiss in it. Well, you didn't apply it at a high enough rate. So make sure you do that conversion. And the same thing with Drive and quinclorac. A lot of products have Drive in it right now. And you don't get that effective weed control, with especially crabgrass or even clover, unless you have 0.75 pounds of active ingredient per acre. So make sure you look at it. So solitaire, quinclorac and sulfentrazone. All right. If you apply it, it's going to range you about $119 to $230 per acre, depending upon your application rate. You can mix that yourself. It's just quinclorac and Dismiss. If you tank mix it, you're looking at $177 per acre. So that $177 per acre is with the effective active ingredient amount to achieve weed control. So we're right kind of in the middle of the range here. So this may be an option. So it's not any different in price, but you don't have to do the math. I don't have to do the math. We just make sure we put it at the right active ingredient rate. You can see though here, sulfentrazone, you've only got 0.19 pounds of active ingredient per acre, and we needed what, 0.25? So you're going to have to increase that rate, and you're going to get up here over that 200, or you're going to get closer to that $230 per acre compared to mixing it yourself. So there is pros and cons when it comes to mixing these. Same thing with blindside, sulfentrazone and metsulfuron, approximately $85 an acre. Tank mix it yourself. You're looking at 73 for Dismiss, 20 for Manor or metsulfuron, $93 an acre. It's about the same. You can get a little bit cheaper with a prepackaged mixture. Surge is Trimec Classic and sulfentrazone, $30 an acre. Tank mix it yourself, you're looking at $96 an acre because you got $23 an acre of Trimec and $73 an acre of Dismiss. So look at these prepackaged mixtures. Sometimes they're going to be more expensive. Sometimes they're going to be cheaper. But make sure you have the right amount of active ingredient in it, so that way you're going to get effective weed control for the right price. So there's a couple of things, the last two things to think about whenever it talks about budgeting and figuring out how price, which is cost effective, interest, point of return, however you want to say it. How hard do you want to work scouting? If you don't have time, people, funding for people to go out and check for weeds, to be on a post application all the time, you may want to look at a prepackaged mixture that's going to have a very broad spectrum. Do you have the extra budget to spray some of these prepackaged mixtures that may be a little bit more expensive? Are you going to get a little bit better sleep at night? Sometimes cost is worth getting a good night's sleep compared to saving $1 or $2 an extra night. So, what is more convenience? The 20-ounce bottle for $1.25 at the gas station, or the 1 liter for 89 cents at the grocery store? So you do sometimes pay for your convenience, and that it goes along with herbicides too. So I think I got plenty of time for questions. I know that was a lot at one time, and I really do appreciate the invitation and you guys sticking around for the end of the first day of the STMA this year. So I'll hang out. If you don't want to ask questions here, I'll hang out afterwards as well, too. So, yes?
One thing I would say is I thought it was a good idea with the software application this year, and it is, I just want to reemphasize what you made about the amount of active ingredients necessary to do the job. You know, I had a situation where we had an earlier spraying and pre-emergent that worked well. We had some areas of crabgrass, and you have a purple and yellow nut sedge problem. That big game coming up, things like that, and it fit in the window of work. But, you know, the good thing about the fingers on, you see a lot of reactions. If you were thinking for people's yards, it'd be great. You walk out there and you spray, and 5 days later, they'll be like, oh, he killed all those weeds. It's wonder. But then they're going to call you back because you haven't made the super. And that was my main question. That data for that, how do you obtain, we know that we wait and we see it come back, but how would you get data on killing those?
The question was, first thing, he said, always make sure you have the effective amount of active ingredient when it comes to whatever you're using. Yeah. How do you obtain tuber mortality data? All right. So a lot of research projects are done where a seed or a tuber respires, okay? Biologically, that plant respires. And if you put a product or a chemical called tetrazolium on it, it changes the color, and you got to look at it under a microscope, okay? So what they did was they sprayed these trials, collected these tubers, and then you could see which plants are respiring because they changed to different colors, called a tetrazolium seed test, and those are viable, and then the ones that do not change colors are not viable or not grow. Another way that they do it is they just try and grow them out in flats. That was been the basic study is if you have all these tubers, you know that are in the soil prior to, and you apply it, you pull them all out, and you plant them individually, then you get a germination rate from them. So you know the ones that don't germinate shouldn't be viable, but that's how the tetrazolium test will confirm viability within that. I hate doing this. I'll vow never to do another one again in my life. So that's why those guys down in Georgia did it. That was, it's all right. I lived there for a while. It's okay. Any other questions? All right, if not, I'll stick around a little bit and answer any more questions, and y'all get to get